Ladies, gentlemen, and rogues of all ages, we have a ton of extremely strong options floating around this season if you are playing this class. It's like a kid in a candy shop type of situation because the general mechanics at play and the background of Rogue as a class are just extremely coherent and powerful this season in general. For the most part, there are two main paths that you will see any powerful Rogue build go down. These are critical strike damage focused and poison damage focused. Usually these two are sort of opposites of each other, as damage over time effects can't crit, and even with blended poison imbuement, which does let crit chance affect poison, it doesn't make your crit damage scale, so we don't actually use that. So it doesn't quite work. However, there are quite a few ways to put poison and crit together for quite some fun. And then of course, pretty much every rogue build under the sun is just capable of getting absurdly ridiculous attack speed this season to make it all function even better. Today we're going to talk about the most competent boss killing build that Rogue has without requiring Andariel's Visage, as the build that I talked about the other day just sort of is flat out better in perfect gear, but it also sort of requires perfect gear to reach the point of being better than this, whereas this one is just insanely strong right out of the box at level 100, and while it can use mythic uniques to reach a point of being able to clear tier 8 infernal hordes, as you'll see here, you do not require the mythic uniques to play the build in general, as you do with the other one. And again, it sort of its specialty here is boss damage, which means that it's actually great for farming mythic uniques as well, if that is something that you're specifically after, either to improve this build or just to move on and try something else. That said, let's break down the skill points, where we put them and why, the specialization choice for the build, the uniques that you will want, and the replacements for these if you don't happen to have them yet, the legendary aspects that we use, the general affixes and stats, as well as the tempering choices for our equipment. Then we'll go over our full Paragon board setup before stopping to talk about how to actually play when you're using this build. Starting off with your basic skill, then, we take Puncture for a pretty simple reason. In this build, we use combo points to fuel the damage of our core skill, which is Rapid Fire. Puncture is a marksman tagged basic skill, so it works with our marksman skill bonuses, but it also works off of your melee weapon attack speed, not your ranged attack speed. This allows us to use daggers as our melee weapons for 1.2 attacks per second at a base, scaling higher with our attack speed bonuses, which we will talk about as we go. But put simply, on top of this skill, also applying Vulnerable, which is great. It is just the fastest skill to build up stacks of the Precision key passive, which lets us do our highest damage shots more frequently. We take its enhancement as well as fundamental puncture to help enable this even further. Then we'll be coming to our core skill cluster, and we'll be taking Rapid Fire, of course, the full 5 ranks of it, and you will notice that I have 25 ranks. That's because you want a ton of bonus ranks on your gloves. Then there are forced bonus ranks on 2 of our other pieces of equipment too, that you will ideally roll masterworking procs on as well to boost this even further. Base skill ranks simply boost the underlying damage of a skill, which makes them more valuable than most other sources of bonus damage because it will apply under every other multiplier that the build has. We also grab Enhanced Rapid Fire for bonus crit chance per arrow fired, and Advanced Rapid Fire for an enhanced crit damage multiplier with the skill for 5 seconds after using your Evade, which is why Evade is essentially part of your damage rotation with this build to keep this specific buff active. This scales extremely well as our main real focus in the setup is crit damage. Then we're going to be taking some passives here, 3 ranks of Sturdy for some bonus damage reduction from close enemies, as well as 2 ranks specifically of Siphoning Strikes for lucky hit chance to heal on critical hits against close enemies. Again, we are focusing heavily on crits, so this is just a load of free healing, and while most of our survivability comes from keeping a barrier active constantly, sometimes a bit of damage will sneak through the barrier, and this helps you repair your health bar underneath the barrier before it can become a larger problem. Then we'll be moving on to our agility cluster here, and here we'll be taking the Shadow Step skill, as well as Enhanced and Disciplined Shadow Step. This gives us an agility skill to trigger buffs related to those, but also a movement skill and also an unstoppable proc to break out of crowd control effects. This applies Daze as well, it applies Vulnerable, it stuns, and it lowers its own cooldown by 3 seconds on use, so it's just a really efficient use of a single skill slot. Then we'll be grabbing 3 ranks of the passive Unstable Elixirs here for a stun to nearby enemies when using a potion, and more importantly, a ton of bonus damage for 10 seconds after using one, letting you use potions as a sort of source of burst damage windows. This is especially good for infernal hordes, where waves of this are 60 seconds long, so if you time it right, 6 potions, 1 of them every 10 seconds, will keep this buff active for the whole wave, and potions get reset in between waves for free, so you can basically just keep this active for the whole activity. We also then take 3 ranks of Trick Attacks. This is sort of bugged right now in the good way. This gives you a stacking crit chance and crit damage multiplier buff every time that you daze or stun an enemy for a few seconds afterwards. At full stacks, this is supposed to be a 36% increased multiplier, but it seems to be multiplicative within itself, so the tooltip is sort of lying. It's actually closer to 42% increased crit damage rather than 36%, so this does actually get even better. The only weak point of this passive is bosses, but it is great for general enemy clearing, and it does activate if you happen to stagger a boss. Moving on then, we have our subterfuge cluster of skills, where things will be getting more than a little bit busy. We will start by picking up 5 ranks of Dark Shroud, as well as its regular enhancement, but nothing further than that. This is an extremely strong defensive skill, especially in Season 5. We activate it automatically through a legendary aspect without even needing to have it on our skill bar, which is why we technically have 7 active skills with points of them. We just happen to use one of them through a passive interaction rather than having it on the bar. As for the enhancements, the healing on Shroud Loss is just unnecessary compared to Deafening Strike, so we don't take that. The extra crit chance is also unnecessary in our setup, so we don't take that. We just save the skill point and use it elsewhere. Then we have Smoke Grenade as well for another active skill, as its enhancement to and also countering Smoke Grenade. This dazes any enemy hit by the grenade, triggering the Trick Attacks passive, which is great. Then it also applies a 25% increased damage multiplier debuff to any enemy in the radius for 5 seconds afterwards. We then also take Countering Smoke Grenade to lower the cooldown by 5 seconds when you hit an elite or boss enemy, and through Gear Tempering, we lower the cooldown of Smoke Grenade to be below 10 seconds. That way, for single target at the very least, or against any elites as well, it will never actually run out, as the buff will stay active for 5 seconds, the cooldown will be reduced to 5 seconds or lower from the enhancement, and then they will just be able to keep it up permanently. After that, we're going to be grabbing Poison Trap as another active skill, and this is great for a couple of main reasons. It can knock down any enemies in the radius, which applies to a passive that we'll talk about momentarily. It increases the damage of any enemy caught within its radius just in general thanks to our enhancements, as well as activating one of our Paragon nodes for a significant damage increase to anything within the radius of the trap. And it also applies poison damage, which helps us stack a different passive later on as well. Then we're going to be grabbing 1 rank of the Exploit passive for bonus damage to both healthy and injured enemies, as well as 3 ranks of the Malice passive for bonus damage to both vulnerable and knocked down enemies, applying double bonus if both are applied. We then apply Vulnerable constantly thanks to the basic skill that we have, as well as a lucky hit chance to apply Vulnerable from one of our uniques. We also knock down enemies with Poison Trap now, making this passive even stronger as a result. Then we'll be moving on to our Imbuement cluster, and here we'll be taking Poison Imbuement, as well as its enhancement, and also Mixed Poison Imbuement. Usually, Poison Imbuement is taken and stacked for the actual poison damage itself, but within this build, we have it because of Mixed Poison Imbuement, letting it reset itself, which lets most, if not all of our rapid-fire casts within this build be poison imbued, as long as you actually hit enemies with it, which then activates some of our other effects by no longer counting as physical damage, but poison. As well, it helps us activate our next set of passives here, which is going to be 1 rank of Deadly Venom for an extra little bit of poison damage in general, but mostly as a gateway for 3 ranks of Debilitating Toxins, which is a hefty damage reduction from poisoned enemies. Though it is worth mentioning, I do have this currently set up to be built to reach the height of content the build can manage to complete, a tier 8 Infernal Hordes in a perfect setup, but if you are doing stuff that is relatively easy in comparison, you're doing tier 7s even, and you're able to survive no problem, then you just want to pump out more damage, you would want to move these points to Weapon Mastery instead for the bonus damage to vulnerable enemies with a bow equipped, and we are using a bow. So essentially you'd be trading 15% damage reduction for 12% bonus damage very directly, and you can make this change back and forth depending on what you happen to be doing at the moment. Then you'll also want to be putting 3 ranks into Alchemical Advantage, and bonus ranks of this on your amulet are incredible as well. That's where my bonus ranks are from. This gives you a stacking buff every time that you do poison damage to an enemy that increases both your attack speed and lucky hit chance, and this passive is extra important because the attack speed that you get from it counts as bracket 2 attack speed. If you don't know, attack speed bonuses have 2 separate caps, both of them at 100%. The first cap is mostly related to attack speed affixes on equipment itself and things like that. If you get more than 100% from equipment, it won't give you more than 100%. The second cap is more associated with things like passives or skill related attack speed or legendary aspects, things like that. You can reach 100% bonus attack speed in each of these stats, but going over this cap in either bracket results in no actual increased speed. So my 8 ranks of Alchemical Advantage being 40% of bracket 2 attack speed is really good because it can stack on top of all of your equipment attack speed too. And I recommend that you go for this too generally for bonus ranks, as it's really effective. As well, we'll be taking 3 ranks of the Frigid Finesse passive. We get lucky hit chance to apply freeze on multiple pieces of gear ideally, which makes it great for general wave clearing content, and we also apply crowd control to bosses relatively quickly, and this full bonus is activated when bosses are staggered as well. Then we have our ultimate cluster, and this will just be a couple of passives, 1 rank of Innervation for lucky hit chance to regain energy on hit, and this has bonus ranks from one of our uniques, but mostly this is for a gateway to the second wind passive, which is incredibly powerful. You want to put a full 3 ranks in here from your skill points themselves, and this will generate a barrier every time that you spend 100 100 energy. You absolutely want bonus ranks of this passive on your pants. They are extremely important and valuable, and with one singular masterworking proc on that tempering effect, the rest of the regular upgrades as well on top of that, not getting any procs, this will go up to 4 bonus ranks, so you'll have 7 ranks total like I do here. 7 ranks is 105% maximum life as barrier when it procs, though 6 ranks is still 90%, so not at all bad if you end up stuck with that instead, but especially as barrier can't go above 100% maximum life anyways, or we'd stack this way further if it could, obviously. Then we have our key passive for the build, and this is quite obviously and also importantly precision, a main part of our core damage engine for the build. This gives you stacks on hit with marksman skills, double stacks on a crit, and at 4 stacks your next rapid fire is a guaranteed crit that also has a massively increased crit damage multiplier, double dipping on itself to do increased damage by a portion of your crit damage multiplier. However, the way that this works is applying a buff to your character, which causes it to multiply itself by counting in the extra 50% from the 4th precision stack itself, so it gets pretty nutty right now, honestly. With that covered, let's quickly talk about our specialization for the build. I did mention it earlier, but this one is going to be running combo points. Combo points with rapid fire means more arrows fired, and more arrows means notably more damage, more ways of proccing like you hit and things like that, and especially with the combo points related unique being so good now this season, it just fits extremely well into our setup for this build. And with that, let's start to talk about our actual gear, starting with the recommended mythic uniques if you do happen to have them, but again, for this build, these are not required to use it in general. They just make it actually able to reach the full heights of endgame content. This is what makes it very easy to do tier 7s, like straight up comfortable, as well as making it possible to do tier 8s. The most relevant one then is Tyrael's Might, the chest piece. This, especially for rogues, is going to be a recommendation for every build if you have it. It just provides such a ludicrous amount of survivability in a singular armor piece. It gives you maximum resistances by itself essentially. It increases your max resistances enough that with 2 masterworking procs on that affix, you will reach the maximum resistance max cap, or at least 0.4% under it, which is pretty funny in itself. And it also has a flat damage reduction affix that is further boosted by masterworking. Again, it's just really fantastic. If you don't have this though, you would instead want to use either a legendary chest piece with the might aspect on it for damage reduction when you use basic skills, as we use basic skills basically all the time, as well as you would want specifically bonus ranks to Dark Shroud as an affix, as bonus ranks to Dark Shroud scale extremely well in increasing its defensive potency. Then that is by far the most important affix for the chest piece if you're using a non-unique. That said, the other option is a unique, which is the Shroud of Condurus. Unique chest which has Dark Shroud ranks naturally on it, but this does increase your evade cooldown, and we want to evade once per 5 seconds to keep our damage buff on, so this one actually does decrease your damage a bit for the utility and comfort of use. If you use an alternate chest piece instead, you will also have to fix holes with your resistances, which you can do either with your jewelry gem slots or with rolls on your legendary armor pieces for extra resistances if needed. Then we have the Ring of Starless Skies. This is really strong offensively, especially for this setup. It does create a slight defensive imbalance as reducing resource costs awkwardly does make us trigger Second Wind less often, but there are 2 main ways to plug that hole. The first is, well, pure raw attack speed, which you get some of from this ring. If you attack fast enough, then 50% reduced resource costs will not stop you from spending 100 energy very quickly. The 50% damage boost as well, and the great affixes on this make it just so extremely worth using if you have it. If you don't have it though, I would instead recommend a ring with either the Starlight aspect if you are struggling for resource management, or alternatively the Expectant aspect if you just want more damage, as we are using combo points anyways, so flipping between basic and core skills is a natural part of the rotation of this playstyle. Then finally, the helm slot is quite interesting for this. For easy breezy speed farming type content, the stuff that literally has no chance at killing you, technically the best helmet is the Harlequin Crest Mythic Unique. This provides a bunch of bonus skill ranks, it provides cooldown reduction, and those things are fantastic for speed. However, there comes a point in survival where this is actually overtaken by the Crown of Lucion, which is basically the reverse effect of Starless Skies, increasing resource costs with every core skill cast, but also still increasing the damage. This gives you a surprisingly similar amount of damage to the Harlequin Crest, but it does require a bit more management and a bit more care because you can run out of energy if you're not careful while using this. What this does do for us for the most part though is reverse the reduced cost of energy from the Ring of Starless Skies and then some, so you can activate the Second Wind passive more frequently and generate 100% maximum life as a barrier much more consistently. That said, again, this goes even further though, because once you have high enough attack speed to keep the barrier up consistently even without this helmet, the Harlequin Crest once again goes back to being better for survival because of the innate 20% damage reduction on the helmet itself and the sizable max life bonus that it has too. So basically, both Harlequin Crest and the Crown of Lucion are really great for this setup. One is a mythic and one is not, so you may not even have to make the choice, but which one is better sort of depends on the content that you're actually doing and what the rest of your stats are starting to look like. Then we have our regular uniques for the build, and the most important one probably by far that I haven't mentioned yet at least is Sky Hunter. This interacts extremely well with the already busted Precision key passive, making your first damage to any enemy guaranteed to be a crit, but importantly giving you both significantly increased crit damage multipliers for your Precision stat consumption, as well as giving you some energy generation when you do so as well, which is just sort of a nice bonus. On top of that, the weapon itself has chance for marksman projectiles to cast twice, which importantly boosts not only rapid fire but puncture too, making us generate combo points faster and precision stacks as well as a result. And as if that wasn't enough, it has a massive crit damage implicit bonus, a massive crit damage affix that can be boosted with masterworking, and then just some bonus attack speed on the weapon itself too. This bow is just absolutely incredible now. Then we have the Scoundrel's Kiss ring. This is the rapid fire unique. It turns rapid fire from a bunch of arrows into lobbing explosions in an arc in a weird stream of artillery. The crit chance is unnecessary thanks to how we use precision, but attack speed again is great, ranks to rapid fire are incredibly important, and further chance for rapid fire projectiles to cast twice is great too. Then we have the Condemnation Dagger as well for managing our combo points, and it's just a bunch of combo point synergies too. 50% chance for any basic skill to immediately generate 3 combo points in one go, a hefty increased damage multiplier on skills used with 3 combo points, as well as damage per combo point as an additive affix, dexterity as well, and basic skill attack speed all being quite good too. Then our last unique is the Umbracrux Dagger, and this thing is pretty massive right now. Also more than a bit bugged with a lot of different things, but in theory, the interactions within this build specifically aren't actually bugged with it, so any fixes shouldn't affect us. The dagger makes subterfuge skills, which for us are Poison Trap and Smoke Grenade, put a Shade Totem on the ground. Damaging the Shade Totem takes this damage and spreads it out and increases it to nearby enemies, dealing loads of damage to them. This works in 2 separate ways generally. It makes single target damage become AoE as you can aim for the totem and make it hit everything around it in the radius, or it makes AoE skills gain further single target. For example, the Scoundrel's Kiss rapid fire ring explosions will both hit an enemy and the totem at the same time if they're beside each other because it does splash damage. So the enemy will take the damage once from the initial blast, but then also take the totem reflecting a part of it as well for a chunk of bonus damage on top of that. It's just a really fun little synergy tool that is only really hurt when the enemies move too much, but that is also why we have the 2 subterfuge skills to allow us to move this totem when you need to. That's it for your uniques then, so let's talk about our actual legendaries within this build, and in your amulet slot for 50% increased effectiveness you want the Conceited aspect. One of our main goals is barrier uptime from the Second Wind passive, and with that being constantly active, you can get the full bonus from this aspect as well. Then on your gloves you want the Edgemasters aspect for increased skill damage with higher resource amounts, and we normally build up to 100% energy just while building up combo points anyways, so every rapid fire should be fired from full energy regardless, not to mention that Sky Hunter also gives us energy when we fire off our core skills with the stacks. Then on your pants you want the Umbrous aspect, lucky hit chance on critical hit to create a Dark Shroud shadow. This is why we have points in Dark Shroud, but don't put it on our bar, as this just passively activates it. Then finally on your boots we have the Concussive Strikes aspect for lucky hit chance to dazed enemies, as well as bonus damage to dazed enemies too, which also counts on staggered bosses. Moving on then, let's just talk about the tempering and the affixes to aim for and masterworking and all that goodness. Generally, you'd want your most important stats for this to be masterworked, and these would be bonus ranks to passives or skill ranks in general, with again Second Wind only needing 1 proc for your pants. For your amulet then, bonus ranks to Alchemical Advantage is the highest priority stat to get. Frigid Finesse is also good, especially if you can get them together. Unstable Elixirs would be fantastic too if you could get ranks of that. Otherwise, things like percentage dexterity gain, attack speed, lucky hit chance, all of those have a place here and they are acceptable as long as you have the Alchemical Advantage, because that's the real hinge here that makes it really strong. For tempers, you want bonus cast with Poison Imbuement as well, with this amount being enough to pretty permanently have Poison Imbuement active as long as you hit with all the shots of rapid fire rather than missing any of them. Then you also want crit damage bonus, which I did not get on this myself. On gloves, ideally you would have rapid fire ranks once again, greater affix as well, especially on that one with all 3 masterworking procs on it if you could, which I did not get personally, I've been unlucky with this piece, and you'd also have crit damage instead of crit chance as an actual base affix, as we have guaranteed crits on the damage that matters. For tempers then, crit damage and ideally lucky hit to freeze enemies for Frigid Finesse. I ran out of tempers on this myself and I ended on stun, which is also good for triggering trick attacks, however I would prefer to have the freeze, so my gloves are just my weakest piece for this build by far. For your pants you want dexterity and life, and you want an armor affix roll on either your pants or your boots, whichever one, with pants technically being better if you can arrange it that way. Without this armor roll you won't hit armor cap unless you're using the Harley Harlequin Crest, and for tempering, this is where you would get your bonus ranks to Second Wind, super important, and then more lucky hit chance to freeze enemies. Then on your boots, it's dexterity and maximum life, and then movement speed is great too, though dodge chance wouldn't hurt either. The tempering on this piece should be smoke grenade cooldown reduction to enable permanent uptime on that debuff, and then movement speed gained per Dark Shroud Shadow, as 5.8% per shadow is a 29% bonus to movement speed in general when all of them are active, which is pretty solid, as we should have all of them active all the time. Finally, for your gear then, for your gems, you want either skulls or resistances filled out in your jewelry, depending on what your stats are looking like. For armor, you want rubies for maximum life gain, or if you're speed farming through easy content that won't hurt you, you can switch these to emeralds for a bunch of bonus dexterity and damage as a result. But that is definitely a bit of a daredevil type of move. Then you just want emeralds in your weapons for bonus crit damage. We have so many different crit damage multipliers in this build that even just this little bit of additive crit damage in your weapons stacks up significantly to make it quite powerful. That does it for your equipment then, so let's dive into the Paragon board setup for this build. Starting off with your starting board then, if you're not having Tyrael's Might yet, you would want to go up the left side here for the resistance to all elements, rare nodes, and magic nodes, but with Tyrael's Might, this is just excessive, you don't need it, so instead we go up the right side through the damage spot. Then you want to get to the actual glyph socket itself, and here we're putting in the control glyph for bonus damage to crowd-controlled enemies, as well as the bonus effect of extra damage to slowed or chilled enemies, and double that to stunned or frozen enemies, which applies to staggered bosses as well, which is quite important to mention. We grab the required intelligence to activate this, as well as both the rare and magic nodes nearby, then head up to the exit of the board, and here we'll be attaching on the Tricks of the Trade board, like so. Head straight up towards the glyph socket itself, right up the middle, and in here we're going to be putting in the ambush glyph, which gives you bonus damage to enemies that are within the radius of your active trap skills, as well as the secondary bonus, which is basically the same thing, but as a small multiplier, which is quite good too. You want to then grab the rare and magic nodes, as well as the strength within the radius to activate the glyph, then you wrap around to the left to get to the legendary node itself, which makes marksman skill use increase cutthroat skill damage for 8 seconds, and vice versa, with Shadow Step being our main cutthroat skill to boost our marksman skill damage as a result, and we can use this more than once every 8 seconds or so it works perfectly for us, and it will always be active. Then we head out the right side of the board specifically to put on the exploit weakness board like this, heading over directly to that legendary node as quickly as you can from the starting area. What this actual node does then is give you a lucky hit chance when hitting a vulnerable enemy to increase your damage for a short duration. If you keep getting this, it will stack, and once it hits the maximum stacks, it will just stay at that maximum bonus for a few seconds, and then reset, and you'll have to build it up again. This is very good because our attack speed is quite quick, we have decent lucky hit chance, so we often build this up very consistently. Then we wrap down through the damage to elite, rare, and magic nodes over here to actually get to the glyph socket itself, and in this one we're going to be putting the combat glyph. This is probably our most important glyph. This increases crit damage for every bit of intelligence node that we purchase in the radius. Crit damage is our most important raw offense stat in basically the whole Paragon board at least, and so we boost this to hell right here by picking up as much intelligence as you can, at least as far as the rest of our board setup allows, as we do have to spend these points elsewhere too. Then you want to head out to the right side of the board next, putting on the no witnesses board like so, and you want to head directly to the glyph socket in the middle, and in here you're going to be putting in the fluidity glyph for bonus effect to magic nodes in the radius, as well as a secondary effect of making agility skill usage increase damage and energy regen for 6 seconds after you use them, which Shadow Step again covers and has a short enough cooldown to actually work within. Then you want to grab the maximum life, rare, and magic nodes within this, especially as we are boosting the magic node efficiency within the radius, so this gives us a bunch of extra maximum life as a result. You then want to head out through the bottom, taking a quick stop here for the extra damage over time reduction from this rare and magic node, because damage over time is honestly the most dangerous type of damage in the game. Then we back out of the bottom side of the board right like here, and we attach on the cheap shot board. First thing you want to do here though is go down to the glyph socket itself, inside of which we're going to be putting the canny glyph. This increases the damage that you do that is non-physical, all of your elemental damage including poison damage. Poison imbuement makes all of the damage from rapid fire count as poison damage, even the non-damage over time part, so this will always be active when you use it as such. It also has the additional bonus of applying a stacking debuff to enemies that increases the non-physical damage they take every time that you do non-physical damage to them, up to a certain cap, of course. Then we'll be wrapping around to the legendary effect itself of this board, which is a stacking damage multiplier buff for you per nearby crowd-controlled enemy. This applies its full buff bonus against staggered bosses, and then we head around to the right through the damage reduction from elites, rare, and magic nodes to get to the right side of the board, and here we're going to be attaching on the Eldritch Bounty board. Head directly to the legendary node itself, as this gives us mainly just 20% increased poison damage while active, which with poison imbuement affects our rapid fire, even the crits themselves, as the full hits count as poison damage while active as we mentioned earlier. Then we're going to be rounding back to the exploit weakness board over here, and drop off of the bottom side of this to attach on the Cunning Stratagem board, on which you want to go directly to the legendary node as quickly as possible. We pick up a bit of armor here just because it's on the path, and this actual legendary node itself gives you a bonus to the non-damage effects of combo points when spent at full points. For rapid fire, this means increasing the number of arrows per cast at 3 combo points from 8 arrows to 9 arrows. This is essentially just a 12.5% bonus multiplier to all rapid fire damage at full combo points as a result of that. Then finally, all the way on the left, coming off of the Tricks of the Trade board, we'll be going out to the left side and attaching on the Deadly Ambush board, and our entire goal here is just getting to this legendary node with the remainder of our points, because what this is a 23% increased critical strike damage multiplier to any enemies that are inside of the radius of your active trap skills, and that is a massive extra bonus that we get with our final points, because again, we do lots of critical strike damage, we have the trap skill that we can use, and a multiplier to your already multiplied critical strike damage just makes it stack even more ridiculously. That covers the Paragon board then, so finally let's just talk about how to actually play this build and this setup. It's not too complex, but it does require a little bit of forethought. Shadow Step should be used essentially on cooldown, activating multiple buffs, but in content where your survival is a bit of a question, sometimes it will be better to just save it for the Unstoppable proc to break out of crowd control. Poison Trap mostly you want to use on cooldown, but especially under elites or larger enemies to give us our damage bonuses to help us kill them faster. Smoke Grenade again, basically on cooldown, with a preference for elites or bosses for the cooldown reset mechanic, and you also want to make sure that you don't use Smoke Grenade and Poison Trap too close to each other, or else you will wind up with Shade Totem not active for a certain period of time from the Umber Crux. Then you want to use Poison Imbuement on cooldown as well, as we always want it active for our Rapid Fire. Outside of that, Puncture until you have 3 combo points, then use Rapid Fire. Because of Condemnation, it's not as simple as saying cast Puncture 3 times then use Rapid Fire, as it won't always be 3 times. Sometimes it'll be 2 casts, sometimes it'll even be 1. And the awkward part is that the combo point visual updates just so slowly that it's sort of hard to know ahead of time, so you essentially have to play the odds. With a 50% chance on basic skill to grant 3 combo points, especially with double projectile chance, 1 or 2 casts of Puncture will almost always generate 3 combo points. So generally, to play it safe, do Rapid Fire every 2 punctures, simple as that. Puncture, puncture, rapid fire. Outside of that, remember that your potions give you a hefty damage bonus for 10 seconds after you drink them, and also that your evade increases your crit damage with rapid fire specifically for 5 seconds after you use it, so do not ignore using it, always have it active if you can. That just about does it for today then, the rapid fire artillery endgame rogue build for season 5, dealing massive crit damage, poison damage, and also just being the best thing for bosses, at least that doesn't require a specific mythic unique to use, and a bunch of stat breakpoints on top of that too, which makes this generally the best thing to use to farm the torment bosses early on as well, so that you can actually get your mythic uniques. Not to mention just being a fun and different playstyle, even if mechanically under the hood there is quite a fair bit of similarity to some other rogue builds. I hope you all enjoyed this then, and I hope you enjoyed using this for yourselves too. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.